Helene here at Cabin Fever Crochet with today's tutorial showing you two methods of how to add beads onto your crochet projects. I'm going to be working in a sample from my last tutorial of my C2C corner-to-corner shawlette that can also be worn as a kerchief style scarf. I had made two, one without beads and one with, so I'm going to use the same pattern as a demonstration to finish that up. And two different methods will depend on whether you are using the same color yarn throughout or if you're switching colors. So you are either kind of adding beads on as you go one at a time with one method, or you're feeding them on all at once on the strand of yarn. And there's different ways that you need to work it within each one, and I'm going to explain that step by step as we go with tips and techniques along the way, and there's a timestamp in the drop-down description section for you. I want to cover all the bases because that might make a difference depending on the type of project and yarn and how you want your beads to lay. And you can use the same color beads throughout, or you can create a little alternating pattern such as I did here with the teal colored yarn alternating by the silver lined crystal. Okay, so as far as supplies go, the size of beads need to fit through the yarn that you're using with one method. It's going to be the second method that I'm going to show you, switching your hooks back and forth from the main hook in the body of your work to the smaller hook, attaching each bead separately as you go. Okay, so you will need a small crochet thread hook and a larger whole bead. Okay, it needs to fit through the bead and the thickness of your yarn as well. I get a lot of my beads from artbeads.com. I'm going to leave the links to suppliers that have had these types of beads. These are the 3/0 or number 3 size, and they are the larger whole. And I really like the TOHO Japanese glass seed beads. Art beads, when I looked, still had about 14 colors. They are out of quite a few, but there are a variety of places where you can find them. And if you have a local bead shop, I suggest checking there. I always love supporting local, and usually they have quite a variety of sizes and types, but I find the number 3 work really well. And I have a few other tutorials already from over the years where I have incorporated beads, so the links to those will be below as well with my recent project. One included is a crochet beaded bracelet, one of the first I did. It's worked a little differently all at once, but I brought this out to give you an idea of another way that you can create a little design for your beads. These are the smaller size, the size 6. And that works really well if you're doing the method where you feed all of the beads on at once, and then you can create a little pattern, and then the size of the hole only needs to fit through the thickness of your yarn because you will be working with the same hook throughout. Hobby Lobby does have some of the number 3 beads and maybe the number 2, which are a little bit bigger, like these checked glass seed beads I found at Joann. They're a little bit larger than the number 3, but the whole size is about the same, possibly even a little bit smaller. But I do like the glass seed beads. They're not heavy and they are so beautiful. They're not expensive and they add such a lovely element to your project. It really makes it shine. As far as metal beads go, you can find some like at Michael's here in the US that are really large hole, which is great, but they are heavy, and when you get beads going around your whole project, it's going to add some weight. So the glass keeps it lighter, works really well with the yarn, because if you have too much weight, it's going to overstretch your yarn. It's not going to look nice after a while. So for that reason, the only time I would probably use the metal beads if I'm doing just maybe 1, 2, or 3, like putting tassels at each end and maybe my center point, and I want to have a bead up at the top, or hanging off of a bag, or as just an accessory, that rather than an entire piece. Okay, and the Japanese glass seed beads I like because they're precision cut, good quality, and really consistent. And anything that is plastic and metallicized, whatever it's finished with, could peel off. So think about that too if this is a piece that you might be washing. If you do, definitely by hand. You don't want it to get beat up in the washing machine, but make sure that the finish is permanent on the beads that you are choosing. And most beads will give you an idea about how many you get per package. Sometimes it goes by weight or by grams, but to get an idea of what you need is, okay, for example, I'm going to work now. This is a 3-row border, and I will be doing the final border row, but I'm also going to explain how you can add beads to the body of the work too with both methods. This method, using the same hook throughout, goes a lot faster. It's a lot easier to do, but you are more limited. The as you go per bead method gives you a little more flexibility in what you can do, but takes more patience and more time, can be more tedious. This method, pretty much any type of yarn works. This one is more fiddly if you have a yarn that is more splitty, because you're working with a much thinner yarn for the gauge of yarn, and something that is loosely wound like this, it's easier to catch. But I'm going to work with this to show you that it can be done and what you can do to help deal with that, so you don't split the yarn and that you still enjoy the process. Okay, so I'm going to start with the feeding all the beads on. All right, so using this project as a demo, then what you would do is, whether you are using this project or something else, then you go ahead and you just continue with the pattern that you're working with, and you decide where you want your bead placement to be. So in the third and final row, which will take us to the right side of the work, we're going to be adding in my faux picot stitch here in every V-stitch, which is a single crochet, a chain 3, and a single crochet. And I wanted to kind of keep it close to the original pattern, and I also wanted the bead to land in the center of that. So to determine how many beads that you need, okay, I know that I'm going to be placing that stitch where I'm putting the bead in every V-stitch all the way around. Now, some patterns you will begin with your increase on the end, so that's going to give you extra stitches on each side. So what I do is to make sure I have more than enough, just in case I count every single V-stitch all the way around. So for example, say I have 70 V-stitches, I'm adding 1 bead. I know I'm going to need 70 beads, and then I will add maybe 4 more just in case. Now if you are going to do a little pattern with alternating, then you take whatever that number is and divide it in half. Then you know you're going to need 35 of one color, 35 of the next. And when you feed the beads on, then you just alternate. Start with whatever color you want. Say I want to start with the teal, and then I'll go teal, silver, teal, silver, teal, silver, all the way down the line. And if you're going to do a pattern such as this, if you have enough room in your pattern to add the set of 3 beads, something like that, you certainly can. You just feed them on in that way, so it would be silver, blue, silver, silver, blue, silver, all the way down the line, but then that would be a lot more beads. So I would need 70, if that's how many placements I have, 70 of the one, and then double that amount, so 140 of the silver. That's a lot of beads, and that can add up, but that is just up to you. I wanted to go over some of the different ideas and patterns that you can do. Oh, and one other thing that you will need is you'll need some flexible large eye needles. And that is only for this method of stringing all the beads on all at once and using the same hook throughout your entire piece. So the eye is in the center all the way down from top to bottom. They're very inexpensive, $1.99 for a set of 4. Initially, it's real tight together, so you can either use a fingernail, or if you don't have longer nails that you can poke through, just take a skinny sewing needle or something and just to open that up. And initially, see, you can open it, stretch it a little bit, but not too much, because if you do, you'll split that end and you won't be able to use it. And it is flexible, but be careful, because if you bend it too much, it's going to make a crimp in the wire and it will stay in that position, and then you won't be able to work with it either, which is probably why you get 4. They don't last too terribly long, but enough to work a number of projects. All right, so just insert your yarn, and this is the method if you are changing colors, okay? Not working with the same color or the same yarn throughout. You're going to be changing colors at the end for your last row, okay? So insert your tail end, and I just leave a short tail, enough so it doesn't slide back out, but I want it short so that way my beads only have to go a short distance through the double thickness of that yarn, and it makes it much easier when you are feeding them on. Okay, so for this one I'll do the purple, okay, and then you just put them on. That's it, however many that you have figured out, plus some extras. And then depending on how thick the yarn is and the size hole of the bead, because sometimes even the inside diameter will vary a little bit, and some yarn it's going to slide easier. You can do a few at a time. I find that's easier. And when you're adding beads and you're doing this method where you've fed them on your yarn all at one time, you're going to have a long strand, a whole long train of beads, and you will have some weight at the end, which will cause them all to slide down to the very end of your yarn, however much you've pulled out. And that's going to be a pain after a while, having to slide each bead up this entire distance every single time. And don't have them too close at the top either, because you're going to use up the slack pretty soon as you're beading, and then they'll get in the way, and you will need to slide them up or down periodically. But when you're at a table, it just gives you a lot more control. They're right there by you. They don't get lost. But if you are, or have the need, you need to sit in a chair, then maybe have a little bowl or something, put a cloth inside the bowl so they don't slide and rattle around, and then just take the end where all the beads are and gently just put that in the bowl and have that next to you. Okay, so once you have added on your beads, take off the large eye needle, and then we need to connect the yarn. So you go to the very end of your row, the row before your border, your very last border row. Okay, so this is the end of row 2 here of the 3-row border in this pattern. I've already worked my chain 1 of the pattern, and I'm going to complete the very last stitch of the pattern, except the very last leg of the last stitch. That's where we connect the new yarn. Okay, so I add a V-stitch into the top of my turning, chain 3 at the top. All right, so I'm going to do my first double crochet, and then you would work whatever the last stitch is, okay, in that chain 1, and then for the very last stitch is is my double crochet. So I begin with my yarn over and pulling through, yarn over, pull through 2, and this is where I stop. My last leg would be the yarn over and pull through the last 2. That's where I stop. I grab the tail end of my new yarn, put it over top of my hook, pull through to complete the stitch, bring down tail enough to sew in the ends, and if I were finishing this piece, then I would take the 2 tail ends, my new yarn, and then the last yarn I finished with, and I would tie those together, okay, to where I could bury them in when I sew in my ends, but for demo purposes I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it open, and then bring up my yarn just enough to where I have some to work with, but close enough to slide up a bead to start. All right, and then begin your pattern as usual, however your pattern reads. Okay, this case it's a chain 1 and turn, and then in the beginning V-stitch, that's where I have my first faux picot, which is the single crochet, chain 3, single crochet. And you, depending on the pattern, you can adjust how long of a drape you want your beads, or how close and flush to the work you want them. All right, and I'll show you a couple of differences there, but I'm going to begin with my first stitch, the single crochet, and I want my beads to be in the center of the chain 3. So I'm going to start with 1 chain, and I will slide up a bead, okay, and then I'm going to work a chain around that like a slip stitch to lock that bead in, and then I'm going to chain 2 on the other side, and I will explain why. Okay, so I chained 1 on the right side, and now on the left side of the bead I need to put in an extra chain, and then now I'm going to complete my stitch with a single crochet in the V-stitch and a single crochet in the next chain 1 space. And the reason I put in an extra chain is because when working this method of adding beads, the bead tends to be more prominent on the wrong side of the work. You can see it here, but it is more facing up and is more centered on the wrong side of the work. And because the last row here is on the right side, I did not want to add an extra finishing row that's on the wrong side of the work. So to correct that, I am going to take the bead and just pop it through that chain that we made around the bead to encase it. And when doing that, it pulls in a little bit of the yarn, and it caused the bead to lean too much to one side, so I added in that extra chain on the left side of the bead, and now it lands in the center, and you can see it very nicely on both sides of the work, which is great for shawls, because shawls you drape in different ways, and sometimes the 2 front ends when they're coming around your body, depending on how you're draping it, and especially in that kerchief scarf style fashion, this can land on either the right or the wrong side. That way you don't have to worry about it, because the pretty beads show up either way. And this can really be kind of reversible anyway, which is nice. So less fiddling when you have it on. A little more up front, but less fiddling in the long run. And once you get your rhythm going, this goes very quickly, and then I just, maybe do a section of these at a time, and then I go back and I just go boop, 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 and pop the beads through. And then I do a little light blocking at the end just to make sure I have everything centered, and I want to maintain the shape and the crispness of that faux picot. All right, so I'm going to do this another couple times, and then I'm going to explain about adding beads to the body of your work, and that will apply to both methods. Go again with the pattern, which is a single crochet. Then I'm going to chain one, slide up a bead, chain to lock that bead in. You see how it creates like a little net or little case around it. And now I'm going to do that chain one and then the extra chain with this method only, okay? And then single crochet back into the V-stitch, single crochet in the chain one space. You see how I'm moving the beads down. You can just slide them down as you go, as you need more working room. Okay, again, single crochet, chain one, slide up a bead, or if you're doing the 3 bead sequence, you can just slide up your set of 3 beads. Okay, finish the slip stitch around the bead, chain 2 on the other side, single crochet in the next. Okay, and then see how this one especially is leaning on the wrong side of the work. So then I just go along, I do my section of them and just pop them through. Yeah, and that's all you do for that. I think, to me, that looks really good, and that solved my dilemma of, oh no, what to do, they're landing on the back. So with my very first project is a scarf that I did with beads, and it's called Let Your Light Shine. Again, that link is below. And I just put beads on the very end, so I wound up cutting my yarn to the length approximate of what I needed, and I fed the beads on. But we just learn as we go and evolve our skill set. That I really like to figure out different ways, different things to do it, and kind of troubleshoot and problem solve. So this is what I came up with to correct this portion, and then learned other ways of attaching beads to create what I had in mind in yet a different way. But when you're doing it like this, you do have some play as far as adjusting the height or the distance of the drape of your beads. So say if you want your beads real flush to your work, if you are working it into the main body of your work and not just on the end, especially if maybe you're putting them on a purse or you're doing small stitches like a single crochet, then whatever your stitch is, you just work your one stitch, slide up a bead, and then do one little chain around that bead, and then just go right back into your next stitch. Okay, in this case, you wouldn't still need to poke that through the chain, but as you can see, then it's very flush to the work, and there are no spaces in between the body of your work and the bead. It's just flush and close together. Okay, so that's one way. And then the opposite end of that, if you want even more of a drape, then you would just add extra chains. Okay, do one of those. All right, so again, the pattern is a single crochet on the beginning 3. I chained 1 and added the bead. Now I'm going to chain 2, slide up my bead, chain around that. So instead of then having 2 at this end, I will need 3. Okay. And then you may or may not need to pop your bead through on this one. You can just try it and see. And if you're like, nah, I don't like it, it's easy to just take out. You will have to poke the bead back through that slip or that chain. So try a couple. I wouldn't do too many if you're not into all that fiddly work. Now the thing is though, now with adding beads to the body of the work, with either method, they tend to want to land again on the wrong side of the work. So in order to get your beads on the right side of the work, then you will attach your beads to the wrong side just for the main body of your work. So if you're working back and forth in rows, or you chain up however many in turn, just make sure you're adding beads to the wrong side. And you can do a pattern if you want, or you can just put them in random wherever you just want a little flash of light and sparkle here and there. And if you are working, say, a smaller project like the scarf, now they think about after the fact, you know, it would be really pretty to just put random beads here and there throughout. And because the scarf, it's a lighter weight one that I did, relatively smaller project in comparison to a shawl anyway, then you could just feed all of your beads on at one time. I mean, and you could do that with a larger project if you wanted to randomly put beads throughout. If you are not changing yarn, okay, and you're working with the same yarn throughout, you can feed a whole ton of beads on there and just slide them up as you go, but just make sure that you have more than enough just in case. But if you are changing yarns, then you could use this method without feeding them on all at once. You could just feed them on with each color change section and maybe just put some beads within that color change section throughout. There's another idea for you. Okay, so now we'll go on to method number 2. And we're going to pretend that these beads have not been fed on. No beads yet. All right, and this is if you do not want to feed your beads on all at once. Too many, you're not sure how many you need, or maybe you want to change colors with your beads or something, or you know, do something a little different, whatever, throughout. And you are not going to change yarns. You are working with the same yarn throughout. Okay, that's when you will use your smaller hook. You will be using both, going back and forth. So we're going to attach them in the same way. You won't need that extra chain on the left side though. Okay, so begin as usual with whatever pattern you're doing. Okay, so this is again that chain 1 and turn, and I'm going to start with my single crochet, chain 1. Okay, and that's just to get the bead in the center and get my 3 chains in there to make that little loop. And if you want it again, if you want it flush, you don't have to chain at all. You just go your stitch and the chain to lock the bead in, your stitch, chain to lock the bead in. You don't need any extra chains. But again, I'm putting them in because that is part of the pattern itself. All right, so once I've made that first chain part of the pattern, set my regular hook down, pick up the crochet hook, and pick up a bead. Then insert my hook into the loop that I dropped, okay? And then I'm going to bring that loop down just a little to have a little bit more control over the yarn. Have it a little bit taut, but not too tight where it pulls out of my hand, but not so loose where I'm going to lose this yarn because the yarn is thicker than the head of the hook, and I don't want to split it or snag it either. And then just go ahead and pull that yarn through the loop and pull that loop through the bead. Bring the loop up just enough so you can reinsert your main hook again. And if your yarn starts to split, you can bring it up, say just a little bit like that, and then take your finger and pull the loop up enough to fit your your main hook in. Then you do the yarn over the chain to lock it in. And then now I only do one on the other side to mirror the right side, because I probably won't need to poke that through. We'll see. I will finish my single crochet and then my single crochet in the next. Okay. And then the next one again, my single crochet and my chain is part of the pattern. Pull up the loop a little bit so you don't lose it back in. Set down your main hook, pick up the crochet hook and a bead, insert your hook in the loop, draw it down a bit for control, yarn over, pull through the loop, and pull that loop through the bead. And again, reinsert your hook, yarn over to lock that in, make my one chain, just as the pattern calls, and my single crochet in the V-stitch and in the next chain one space. Okay, so this is on the right side of the work, and with this method you don't have to pop them back through. I found that it just lands real nicely and you can still see it on both sides of the work. Okay, so that's a nice feature with this, but again, there are more steps, but again, once you get going, it works out, and again, you get your rhythm. And I think for some projects, adding this little special touch is just worth the extra effort. But with this pattern, I really like them both equally, with and without beads. But I just, as always, I say I like to have my options, and just what I learn and figure out as I go, I like to share that with you too. Okay, and like I said, you can adjust the height of your beads how flush you want. And what I would do, this is landing on the right side of the work, and in the body of the work with this method, it may very well also land on the right side of your work, which is great if you are working in the round, and you won't have to worry about the bead landing on the wrong side or trying to flip it. So another good feature of this method is it gives you yet another way of adding beads into a different project. Okay, so I'm going to do one more single crochet, work my chain, and you will be doing whatever your pattern calls for. Okay, pick up the smaller hook and a bead, insert to the loop, yarn over, pull through the loop, and pull through the bead. Set it down, other hook, lock it in, my last stitch, and moving right along. And there we go. That is all there is to this one. Okay, that is it. That's it. Just give it a try. It's a lot of fun. I like it, but anyway, I hope you found it helpful and useful. You can incorporate into a variety of projects. Take good care, everyone. Hope to see you again next time for more yarny fun together. Have a great, wonderful rest of your day or evening. Till next time, bye for now.